performance training PST, day 7. Day 7 of high performance training PST will discuss performance planning. Now, performance planning is a really easy topic to, I guess, just define. I mean, when you're going to perform, you should have a plan for performing. In this case, we're going to use all of the PST or psychological skills training that we've used before to create a dynamic sort of way of living, training, and competing, in the sense that if we continue to do this ongoing, just like our normal training would be in strength and conditioning and in the wrestling room or any other activity that we would be doing to prepare to perform at a high level, we add the high performance training PST right along with that. And in that sense, this means we're aware of what we're focusing on. We're writing down our goals consistently, and we're going over those with our coach maybe once or twice a month or so. We're talking to ourselves in a productive manner just about every instance that we have an opportunity to, and we're managing our energy, which means that we're controlling our emotions, and we have emotional discipline, which is going to get us to the place of where we need to be. So those are kind of the basics of performance planning, but today I'm also going to give you more information on some things that may actually come up in your plan that we may not have talked about just yet, but we're gonna talk about them now, and then we're gonna have maybe a whole nother session in this area, because it's something that I think is the crux of PST or psychological skills training. And that specific topic is having a mental routine. Now again, I'm aware that certain words can trigger certain responses. In fact, psychiatry, psychology, mental, the mind, they make a lot of people afraid. So I've come up with a different term, actually, which means the same thing, but sometimes words can mean the same thing. Two different words can mean the same thing, and one has a better connotation, meaning it may sound better to us, meaning it may make us feel better. And in my experience, that's a big deal. How we feel a lot of times affects how we perform. So instead of calling it a mental routine, and I still think that's a valid way to kind of describe it, I'm also aware that a mental routine would scare some people, just like psychology skills training, I think, scares people. So that's why we've named it PST. So instead of calling it a mental routine, and we'll go into a description and definition here in a second, we can call it a recovery plan. A recovery routine. Okay, so what are those three terms? What is a mental routine? What is a recovery plan? What is a recovery routine? And why are they important? Okay, so now we're talking about performance planning, and a part of our performance plan would be, psychological skills training, sports specific skills training, strength and conditioning, and all of the other ideas that go along with it. And part of some of those ideas that go along with it, at least from the psychological skills training point of view, is planning for, and I'm trying to soften this and not make it so heavy. However, it is what it is, right? That's like a phrase that a lot of people use these days. This type of planning can be used for panic. This type of planning can be used for anxiety attacks. This type of planning can be used for adversities that you did not plan for, right? So there are a lot of things that actually can happen in tournaments that you're just not, you weren't ready for them. Well, we didn't go over this in practice. And this type of recovery routine or recovery plan will get you back to your focus and your task, so that nothing disturbs you, nothing distracts you. You're focused on your goal, and you're going to continue to get that goal or strive and seek that goal until you're just going to keep going until you get it, or time runs out in the case of a period of a match. So another way to describe a recovery plan would be when you go out of bounds and you get a bad call, instead of freaking out and wondering, okay, how the heck am I going to recover? Why did they give me the bad call? And saying all these negative things that we've kind of talked about with the self-talk, we immediately have 3 or 4 or 5 things. And it's going to depend. I'm giving you an example here so you can see how a recovery plan or a recovery routine would actually work. Before I do that, though, I'm going to give you a couple more descriptions and definitions so it can make sense. When I was, I want to say about 21, maybe 19, 20. I think 19 or 20 was the first time I had a surgery, and this will make sense here quickly in a second. I went into, getting an evaluation. They say, this is what's wrong with you. 2 weeks later, you have a surgery. After the surgery is done, they put you in a recovery room, right? And in that case, it's kind of a serious deal. Usually when you are having some type of surgery, you're under anesthetics and basically you're asleep while they're performing the surgery. A lot of complications can actually happen during the surgery and or after the surgery. To make certain that your body is fully recovered, they put you in a recovery room and someone's actually in there watching you, making certain that, your heart's beating at the right pace, whatever injury you had is, healed and is not infected, and ultimately, I think sometimes, depending on what type of surgery you could be and how long the anesthesia takes to wear off, you could be in the recovery room for 1 or 2 hours, gradually getting back to what is called homeostasis, which we'll go into later on when we talk about high performance training 2. So the idea of the recovery room is to get your body back to homeostasis and back to the normal way that you would have been. In other words, when you were in surgery, that's not a normal state. After the surgery, you go into a recovery room so your body can gradually come out of anesthesia and get back to where it needs to be. Another type of recovery, so that, that's an example of a recovery. And I'm giving you an example so you can see how this is going to blend in with the other recovery plan that we're talking about. Again, we're talking about performance planning and how that can be a vital part of the performance plan. Another type of recovery would be in between bouts, right? A lot of times you have tournaments and you wrestle junior nationals, for instance, in the USA. Junior national tournament for guys, when I was in that thing, it was a 3-day tournament and I had 12 matches. So on average, I had 4 matches a day, but it didn't really work like that. The last day, I had 1 match, and so the first 2 days, I had 10 matches. So imagine that. 5 matches a day, 5 matches, and then 1 match the final day. Or it might have been 2 matches the final day. I think the semifinals were in the morning, and then the finals were at night. So that still was 12 matches, 5, 5, 2. So I ended up having 12 matches. I went 10 and 2. So the challenge is that's a lot of matches for a week of competitions, right? 12 matches. So in between rounds, your body actually does recover. And the reason why you recover is because you're not doing the same intense amount of work, and your body actually relaxes and comes down just a little bit. So I'm giving you examples of recovery. Within a training session, you typically will have recovery in between bouts of training, and the recovery time is there again to get your body back to homeostasis, bring down your heart rate, let your mind relax just a little bit, okay? And the third type of recovery plan that we're going to talk about today is sort of what I initiated in the beginning, a mental routine. These are things that we're going to be doing in case of adversity, in case of panic attacks, in case we get a bad call, in case and this has happened, in case we don't get to our destination on time. I'll give you a quick story here. One of the times when I was at I was at a World University Championships, and the bus actually left. It left like 15 or 20 coaches there. Instead of standing there wondering how we were going to get there, we came up with a recovery plan. Okay, what do we need to do next? How are we going to get there? Let's take a cab when we got there. Mind you, this is the World Championships. The finals were, in an hour. So we were in Greece, and we were about, I'd say 5, 6 miles away. So it took us about, 15, 20 minutes with traffic to get there. But we didn't speak Greece. We didn't speak the language, and we were all, they spoke a little bit of English, and we got a cab, and then we got down there. So the recovery plan there was to, what do we need to do next, and here's what the game plan is, and this, and then we finally got to our destination. I'm giving you an example of how that was an adverse situation in a different country, where instead of panicking and sitting there and not doing anything, we came up with a recovery plan so we could get to where we need to go. So in an instance where you get a bad call, or they're several examples that you can come up with. Things don't go the way that you planned them to go, right? You shoot in on a shot and the person stops shredding square hips and goes behind you and they turn you, for instance, in freestyle, Greco-Roman, or in folk style. What do when you're back on your feet? Do you constantly replay that over and over and over and over and over again in your mind, or do you let it go and then you move forward? That's a big part of moving forward, and that's a big part of progression. That's a big part of development. Understanding that, okay, what I need to do now is, focus on the task at hand. Okay, so how do we do that? I've just given you examples so you can see, different types of recovery plans and how they could actually work with you. How do we create a recovery plan? One of the first things that I've been mentioning in many of these audio notes is to actually write things down. Of course, the topic that we're talking about today is performance planning. One way to actually plan your performances is to write things down. And you probably already have some type of physical warm-up that you do, and I suggest write that physical warm-up down, right? If you have practice every day and your coach runs your warm-up and they put you through practices, there are things that you can actually be saying to yourself in your mind. There are images that can be going through your head. If you write them down consistently, you can work on them every single day. Now, if your coach does not run the warm-ups and you do your own warm-up, again, you could write down some key things that you're going to do in your warm-up. And maybe there are, 10 or 15 things that you're going to do in a warm-up. As an example, maybe you're going to start off with 5 or 6 laps jog, and then you're going to do skip, hop, jump, then you're going to do karaoke, then you're going to do some tumbling, cartwheels, gymnastics, then you're going to, work on stance and motion, and then you're going to start to drill with your partner. All of those things probably could take 10 to 15 minutes. While you're writing all of this down, as an example, you'd write all of this down prior to the practice, and you'd go into the practice and you'd work on that every single day that you had training, if you have the opportunity to do your own warm-ups. At the same time, that's your physical routine. You write down a mental routine, right? And this is where they can become two different things, where the mental routine in this case probably could be the visions that you're seeing in your head, the imagery that's going on in your mind, and things that you're saying to yourself to prepare yourself to perform at a high level. And in case of emergency, we've got a recovery plan. You can use both, or you can use them interchangeably, or they could be used for both. Maybe you're using the recovery plan as an example of a part of your warm-up, where you're going through the warm-up in your mind and you're saying to yourself, okay, when this happens, I'm going to do this. When this happens, I'm going to do that. I'm saying prior to that, though, you would write down things that can actually happen to you that you don't want to happen, right? Maybe it could be I'm down by 4 with 3 seconds to go. Maybe it could be the person slaps me in the head and they scratch me. Maybe it could be I get a bad call. And you spend some time on this. I'd say 5, 15, 20, 30 minutes, a day, until it gets to the point where you feel confident with it, that when these things start to come up in practice, you're aware of them, and then you go right into the routine that you planned for yourself. When this happens, I do this. I take a couple of deep breaths. I focus on the task at hand, and then I get right back in there, and then I continue to move forward. A person slaps me in the face and to try to distract me and, get me out of my game, so I slap them back. When that happens, I do this. And then you create a bunch of different scenarios that have happened or that you could foresee happening, right? And again, I'm suggesting that the more that we actually become aware, the more examples that actually happen in our life, we can write those down. Then we can create a dynamic recovery plan in the case of emergency. In the case of I don't believe that I have enough confidence, I write that down, and then these are the things I'm going to say to myself and do when that actually comes up in a tournament. Because from time to time you will feel super confident, and other times you will feel underconfident. When I feel underconfident, these are the things that I actually say to myself. Again, these are things that we actually will write down step by step. When this happens, I'm going to do that. If I feel unconfident and I don't believe that I can, achieve, I have a stop sign that comes up in my head, and then I take a couple of deep breaths, and then I review all of the things that I've done in practice and how I've gotten to where I am right now. I go through my goals one by one for this specific tournament, and then I take a couple of deep breaths, and then I begin my warm-up, and then I continue that pattern until it's time for me to whatever. I don't know, if you have a match, then you relax. If you're, feel like it's a tournament where you're gonna have 6 or 7 matches, maybe you do that routine 6 or 7 times. The idea, though, is to have a recovery plan for all sorts of circumstances that are gonna put you out of whack, or distract you, or take you away from your complete focus. when we come up with those routines, this is where all the recovery plan or the recovery routine, this is where all of the psychological skills training that we've been talking about can come into effect. When this happens, I have this type of imagery going on. When someone, says something that I don't like, I, take the constructive criticism from it, and then I envision myself overcoming whatever they just said. I envision myself doing the opposite of what they said, as an example. So there's all kind of adversities that can happen to you, whether it's someone saying something to you, whether you're getting injured. When I get injured, this is what happens. When I get injured, I understand the injuries are going to happen in sport. Of course, you've written this down. I'm speaking it to you. When I get injured, I understand the injuries are going to happen in sport, and this is an opportunity for me really to develop my psychological skills training. Now, because I am injured, these are the things I'm going to do. The flip side of what I'm suggesting here is if we do not have a plan for things, they actually can create more anxiety. They actually can make us panic. They actually can freak us out. They actually can distract us. On the other side, if we create a performance plan and we use all the psychological skills training that we've been working on here, you'll be ready for everything. Nothing will actually get in the way of you performing at a high level, because you can't practice every single thing that's going to happen in practice, right? There are so many different variations of things that can happen. You can't practice them all. What you can do is say, when things come up and they do not go my way, this is how I'm going to react. And not only will you be saying this, you will have a plan. Years ago, when I was younger, football teams would have actually playbooks where they would have all of these different plays that would happen, and that was, sort of like a performance plan for them, where, if the score is this, then we do that. If we're on this yard line with this time, we actually do that. I suggest that's a good idea for wrestlers to do too. In this case, that we're talking about a performance plan, which involves a mental routine and a recovery routine or recovery plan. In this case, I think we could do the same thing, where we could have pages and pages of notes where we actually are going through all of the different things that can happen, and then plan for the unplanned, right? Sometimes we don't have a plan. We don't even know what's going to happen, but because we've had a recovery routine where someone distracts us, and then this is what we do when we get distracted, and the distraction could be open-ended. We have no idea what it's going to be, but the idea that you've got 3 or 4 things that you're absolutely going to do, which are going to entail, again, imagery and your goals and how you're talking to yourself and how you get back to focusing. And maybe it is taking a couple of deep breaths. Maybe it is saying to yourself, this is what's going to happen next. Maybe it is asking your questions, is what do I need to do now in order to perform at a high level? Again, this is all written down. These are things that you can do if you're doing them on a consistent basis. They are going to help you recover under any type of circumstance, whether it's adversity, panic attack, anxiety, anything you can think of, if we've worked on it consistently as a part of our performance planning.